Hello friends, please like and subscribe to the channel and enjoy the stories. Chapter 1. The Stranger in the Rain. The rain fell in a rhythmic cadence, soft yet persistent, as Maya tucked her chin deeper into the scarf wrapped around her neck. It wasn't unusual for evenings in October to turn damp in Toronto, but tonight the downpour felt relentless. She hurried along the cobblestone streets of Kensington Market, her umbrella rendered useless by the wind's mischievous tug. Her destination was the small cafe on Baldwin Street, a hidden gem she had stumbled upon 2 weeks ago while searching for inspiration for her next painting. It had the kind of charm that spoke to her artistic soul: rustic furniture, mismatched tea sets, and a faint smell of cinnamon that seemed to linger even when no pastries were baking. Tonight, though, the cafe was more of a refuge from the rain than an artistic muse. Pushing the door open, she was greeted by the familiar chime of the bell overhead and the cozy warmth that instantly wrapped around her. A few customers were scattered across the room, but one person stood out almost immediately. Seated by the window, where raindrops painted fleeting patterns on the glass, was a man. He had an aura of quiet intensity about him. His dark hair was damp, evidence that he had arrived only moments ago, and his sharp features were softened by a light smile as he skimmed the pages of an old leather-bound book. There was something magnetic about him, something that made Maya pause mid-step. "Care to share your thoughts, or do you prefer staring from a distance?" His voice was smooth, teasing but not unkind. Maya blinked, realizing with a start that his eyes, deep gray and flecked with something unidentifiable, were now on her. Flustered, she fumbled for words. I didn't mean to." "Relax," he interrupted, closing his book with a gentle thud. "I'm just teasing. Come, sit. You look like you've braved the worst of the storm." Normally, Maya would have declined. She didn't make a habit of sitting with strangers in cafes, no matter how charming they seemed. But there was something about him that felt familiar. Against her better judgment, she found herself sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm Maya," she offered, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. "Liam," he replied, extending a hand. His touch was firm yet oddly comforting. "What brings you here on a night like this?" Maya hesitated. "I come here to think, to draw sometimes." She pulled out her sketchbook, which had survived the rain thanks to the oversized tote she carried. "And you?" "Passing through," he said, his tone enigmatic. "Though, it seems I was meant to be here tonight." There was a weight to his words, one that Maya couldn't quite place. Over the next hour, their conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving between art and philosophy, dreams and regrets. Liam was well-read, with an intellect that rivaled his wit, and Maya found herself captivated by his every word. But there was an undercurrent of mystery to him. He avoided personal details, skillfully deflecting questions about his past or where he was headed. Instead, he seemed more interested in learning about her aspirations, her fears, her favorite memories. By the time the cafe owner announced closing time, Maya felt like she had bared her soul to a man who remained an enigma. As they stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement in a kaleidoscope of colors. Liam turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I have to go," he said, his voice softer now, tinged with something she couldn't quite name. "Will I see you again?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "Open this when you get home," he said, placing it in her hand. Without another word, he disappeared into the night, his silhouette swallowed by the shadows of the narrow alley. Maya stood there for a moment, the note burning in her palm. When she finally unfolded it back in the comfort of her tiny apartment, her breath caught. The handwriting was precise, almost too perfect, and the message was simple. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be alive." Confused and intrigued, Maya flipped the paper over, searching for a clue, but all she found was a date scrawled at the bottom, 2 years ago. Her mind raced. How could this be? Had she misread him? Was Liam even real, or had she just shared an evening with a ghost? Chapter 2. The Echo of Yesterday. Maya spent the next few days grappling with the strange encounter, her thoughts spiraling in a loop. Who was Liam? Why had he seemed so familiar, yet remained a mystery? And what did the date mean? 2 years ago. Her sketchbook, usually her solace, offered no relief. Every page she turned to became consumed by sketches of him, his sharp jawline, the way his damp hair clung to his forehead, the depth in his gray eyes. But no matter how vivid the drawings, they only deepened the ache of not knowing. Unable to let the note go unanswered, she decided to revisit the cafe. It was raining again, as if the sky were conspiring to recreate the night they met. Maya clutched the folded note in her pocket as she stepped inside, half expecting to see Liam seated at the same table by the window. Instead, the cafe was bustling with the hum of conversations and the clinking of coffee cups. She approached the counter, her voice faltering as she spoke to the barista. "Excuse me, do you remember a man who was here a few nights ago? Dark hair, gray eyes, reading a leather-bound book?" The barista, a young woman with bright blue hair and a nose ring, tilted her head. "Sorry, hon, we get a lot of people like that, broody and mysterious types. Was he with you?" Maya hesitated. "Yes, but he left this." She pulled the note from her pocket, as though it might jog the woman's memory. The barista's eyes narrowed, and a peculiar expression crossed her face. "I think you're mistaken. That date, it's from 2 years ago." "I know," Maya said, her voice rising, "but I met him here, just the other night." The woman leaned in, her voice dropping. "You're not the first person to ask about him. There was another girl a year ago. Same description, same story. She swore she met him too." Maya's heart pounded. "What happened to her?" The barista shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "She stopped coming here after a while. Said she needed to let it go." Maya left the cafe more unsettled than when she arrived. The world outside was a blur of rain-soaked lights as she wandered aimlessly, her feet carrying her toward the alley where Liam had vanished. She stopped at the entrance, peering into the narrow corridor. It was empty, save for the faint flicker of a lamppost at the far end. She hesitated, then stepped inside, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. The air was thick, the scent of wet concrete and something faintly metallic hanging in the cold. As she neared the end of the alley, a soft rustling sound made her freeze. Her breath caught as a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Liam. It was an older man, his face weathered and lined with age. He carried an umbrella and moved with a deliberate, almost ghostly grace. "You're looking for him," the man said, his voice gravelly. Maya stiffened. "What do you mean? Who are you?" "Someone who once looked for him too," the man replied, his gaze heavy with sorrow. "But you won't find him. Not the way you want to." "Why not?" she demanded, clutching the note tightly. The man's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Because Liam is not bound by time like the rest of us. He's different, a fragment of something broken. He appears to those who need him, but he doesn't stay. He can't." Maya shook her head, unwilling to believe the absurdity of what she was hearing. "That's impossible. He's a person, not some phantom." The man sighed. "Believe what you will. But if you want answers, go to where the note leads. The date isn't just a memory, it's a place." Maya frowned, her fingers brushing the crumpled paper. "A place?" The thought hadn't occurred to her. "How do you know all this?" "I've followed the trail before," the man said, his voice low. "But be careful. You might find more than you're ready for." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya alone in the dim alley. Her mind raced as she unfolded the note once more. The date, October 21st, 2022. What had happened on that day? And where would it lead her? Unable to shake the man's cryptic warning, she returned home and dove into research. She scoured online archives, news articles, and anything tied to that date in Toronto. Hours passed, and just when she thought she'd find nothing, an article caught her eye. Tragedy at Baldwin Street Cafe. Fire claims the life of aspiring writer 28. Maya's blood ran cold as she clicked on the article. The victim's name was Liam Carter. Chapter 3. The Fire That Never Died. The screen's glow lit Maya's face as she read the article again, each word tightening the knot in her chest. Liam Carter, 28, had died in a fire at the very cafe where she had met him. The incident, dated October 21st, 2022, was attributed to an electrical fault in the kitchen. Witnesses described a sudden burst of flames, a frantic evacuation, and one person, Liam, who never made it out. Maya stared at the grainy photo accompanying the article. It was him, unmistakably. The same dark hair, piercing gray eyes and quiet intensity etched into his expression. But how? How could she have spoken to him, laughed with him, just days ago if he had died 2 years earlier? Her thoughts swirled in chaotic disbelief. Maybe it was a prank, a cruel coincidence, or maybe the old man in the alley wasn't insane after all. He's not bound by time. The phrase repeated in her mind, taunting her. Sleep was impossible that night. Instead, she sketched furiously, her pencil capturing every detail she could recall of Liam. The subtle curve of his lips, the way his hand rested lightly on the edge of his book, the ghost of a smile in his eyes. By dawn, her desk was littered with pages, her exhaustion outweighed by the determination to find the truth. She decided to go back to the cafe, not to speak to the barista again, but to confront the space itself, to stand in the place where Liam had both lived and died. The cafe was quieter than usual when she arrived, the scent of coffee mingling with faint traces of cleaning products. Maya scanned the room, her eyes falling on the table by the window where Liam had sat. Her heart sank. It was empty, just as she'd feared. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table as she sat, willing herself to feel some kind of connection, some trace of him. The note was tucked in her pocket, its edges worn from her constant handling. Looking for something? The voice startled her. She turned to see a man wiping down the counter, a new employee, she guessed, since she hadn't seen him before. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with a kind face and sharp, observant eyes. Not something, Maya said hesitantly. Someone. He raised an eyebrow, setting his cloth aside. You mean Liam? Her breath hitched. You knew him? The man nodded, leaning against the counter. He was a regular here, a writer, always had that old leather notebook with him, quiet but polite. Everyone liked him. His gaze softened. You're not the first person to come asking about him, you know. Maya blinked. I don't understand. How can that be? He died. In the fire, I know, the man interrupted. I was here that night, barely made it out myself. But Liam, he never really left. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice trembling. The man sighed. It's hard to explain. Some say his spirit lingers because he had unfinished business. Others think he's caught between moments like a fragment of time that refuses to fade. Maya swallowed hard. Why me, though? Why would he come to me? The man's eyes narrowed slightly as if he were weighing how much to say. He's drawn to people who are searching, who are lost in their own way. Maybe you needed him as much as he needed you. Maya slumped back into her chair, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. But he felt so real, she said softly. How can someone who's gone feel so alive? The man offered her a sad smile. That's the thing about echoes. They're only as real as the ones who hear them. Maya spent the rest of the day tracing Liam's footsteps, or what she could find of them. She visited the nearby library, hoping to find any remnants of his life as a writer. A librarian pointed her to an obscure anthology of unpublished works from local authors, and there it was, a short story by Liam Carter titled The Unfinished Hour. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The story was hauntingly beautiful, detailing a man trapped in a single moment of time, unable to move forward but desperate to leave behind something meaningful. The last paragraph hit her like a tidal wave. To be remembered, even as a whisper in the rain, is to live beyond the boundaries of time. And if my presence fades, may it be because I've found my place, not in eternity, but in the heart of someone who understands. The walk home that evening was heavy with reflection. As Maya passed the alley where she had first seen Liam disappear, she felt a strange pull, like a whisper brushing against her consciousness. She stepped inside, her breath fogging in the cool night air. Liam? She called softly, her voice barely more than a murmur. There was no answer. But as she turned to leave, she spotted something glinting on the ground. Bending down, she picked up a small silver key. It was old, worn with time, and attached to it was a tag with an address she didn't recognize. Maya's pulse quickened. Another clue. Another step closer to understanding Liam and the mystery that bound them together. She tucked the key into her pocket and whispered into the night, I'll find you. For the first time, she felt certain. This wasn't just a story of the past. It was her story now, too. Chapter 4. The Door to the Unknown. Maya stared at the silver key in her palm, its cold weight grounding her in the surreal reality she was living. The tag's address, scrawled in faded ink, was unfamiliar. 126 Grayson Avenue. The name rang no bells, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. The next morning, she plugged the address into her phone. It was located in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city, a 30-minute bus ride from her apartment. Maya packed her sketchbook and the note Liam had left, tucking them carefully into her bag. The journey was uneventful, but her nerves simmered as the bus creaked to a stop near Grayson Avenue. The neighborhood was quaint, lined with small houses, each with a neatly tended lawn. The trees, stripped bare for the season, stood like skeletons against the gray sky. Maya found the house easily. Grayson Avenue was a modest brick home, its shutters peeling with age. The garden was overgrown, its wildness a stark contrast to the tidy homes surrounding it. She hesitated at the gate, her fingers gripping the iron bars. Was she really going to do this? What if she was wrong? What if the key didn't fit, or worse, what if it did? Summoning her courage, she pushed the gate open, its rusty hinges groaning in protest. She approached the door, her boots crunching against the gravel path. The silver key felt almost hot in her hand as she slipped it into the lock. It turned easily. The air inside was stale, tinged with the faint scent of dust and aged wood. The house was eerily silent, save for the creak of the floorboards under her feet. Maya stepped into what appeared to be the living room. The space was sparse, with only a faded armchair and a small table by the window. A fireplace sat cold and empty, its mantel cluttered with items that seemed frozen in time, an old pocket watch, a ceramic figurine of a bird, and a stack of yellowed papers. Maya's eyes were drawn to the largest item on the mantel, a framed photograph. She approached it cautiously, her breath hitching when she saw the familiar face staring back at her. It was Liam. In the photo, he was younger, his smile freer, less burdened. Beside him stood an older woman with kind eyes and a striking resemblance to him. Maya guessed it was his mother. She picked up the photo, her hands trembling. On the back was a date, April 12th, 2015. "Who are you, really?" she whispered into the empty house. She spent the next hour exploring the rest of the home. The kitchen was empty, the appliances covered in a thin layer of dust. Upstairs, she found a small bedroom with a single bed and a desk. It was here that she uncovered what she had been hoping for, a leather-bound notebook lying in the center of the desk. Maya's heart pounded as she picked it up. It was unmistakably Liam's. She opened the cover, her fingers brushing against the pages, which were filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and snippets of stories. One page stood out, marked with a small piece of folded paper. She carefully unfolded it, revealing a short, unfinished passage. "I've left too many stories untold, too many words unspoken. If you found this, you followed the trail. You've seen my world as it was and as it could never be, but there's one last place you must go, the place where it all began. 4 p.m., October 21st, 2022. You'll find me there." Maya's mind raced. The note wasn't just a reflection of the past, it was an instruction. A specific time and date. Was it a clue? A warning? Or something else entirely? Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a reminder. It was already October 21's. The clock read 2:47 p.m. She had just over an hour to find out what Liam meant. The bus ride back to the city felt interminable. Maya kept checking the clock, the minutes ticking away too quickly. Liam had said she would find him where it all began. For him, that could only mean one place, the cafe. When she arrived, the street outside the cafe was eerily quiet. The rain had returned, a light drizzle soaking the pavement. Maya checked the time. 3:56 p.m. She stepped inside, her pulse hammering. The cafe was empty except for the barista, who gave her a curious glance but said nothing. Maya made her way to the table by the window, the one where she had first met Liam. She sat, clutching the notebook in her lap. The minutes crawled by. 59. Her breath quickened as the seconds ticked toward 4. The rain outside intensified, the sound of droplets against the glass filling her ears. And then, as the clock struck 4, she felt it. A shift in the air, subtle but undeniable. She looked up, and there he was. Liam. He stood in the doorway, his dark hair damp, his gray eyes filled with the same quiet intensity as before. He smiled faintly as their eyes met, but there was something different about him now, something heavier, You came, he said softly, stepping closer. Maya couldn't speak. She simply nodded, her throat tight with emotion. You found the key, he continued, his voice tinged with both gratitude and sorrow. You followed the trail. What is this, Liam? She finally managed, her voice trembling. How are you here? How is any of this possible? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. I don't have much time, he said, but you deserve the truth. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers. The warmth of his touch was real, too real for someone who shouldn't exist. I'm a fragment, Maya, he said, a piece of a moment that was never finished. The fire, it trapped me, suspended me between what was and what could have been. I don't know why I'm still here or why I found you, but I know this. You've given me something I thought I'd lost. What? She whispered. Purpose, he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes. Liam, there has to be a way to help you, to free you. He smiled faintly. You already have, by remembering me. The rain outside slowed, the world around them softening like a fading dream. Liam's form began to waver, his edges blurring. No, Maya cried, reaching for him. But his smile remained, steady and serene. Thank you, Maya, for everything. And then he was gone. The cafe was silent again as though nothing had happened, but in her lap the notebook remained, a testament to the life Liam had lived and the connection they had shared. Maya sat there for a long time, the rain outside now a gentle whisper. She didn't understand everything that had happened, but she knew one thing for certain. Liam's story wasn't just a ghost of the past. It was a part of her now. Chapter 5. The Unwritten Chapter. In the days that followed, Maya found herself consumed by a strange mix of grief and wonder. Liam was gone, yet he had left behind something tangible, his notebook. She spent hours poring over its pages, each word a window into his mind, each sketch a glimpse of his world. The notebook wasn't just a collection of thoughts, it was a map of Liam's soul. His stories were fragmented but vivid, full of longing, hope, and unspoken truths. One story, in particular, caught her attention. It was titled, The Window Beyond Time. The narrative followed a man who discovered a mysterious window in his home. Through it, he could see a different version of his life, a life where he had taken risks, spoken the words he had always held back, and embraced the moments he had feared. But the window was fragile, and every time he touched it, it cracked a little more. The story ended abruptly, mid-sentence. Perhaps the window wasn't meant to show me what I could have had, but what I still... Maya read the unfinished line over and over, her mind filling in the blanks. What I still could be. What I still need to let go of. The story felt eerily personal, as though Liam had written it not just for himself, but for her. Determined to honor him, Maya began to piece together his unfinished works. She spent nights at her desk, her pencil flying across her own sketch pad as she imagined endings for his stories. The sketches became companions to his words, visual echoes of the emotions he had poured into the pages. But as much as she tried, there was one question she couldn't shake. Why her? Why had Liam appeared to her? One evening, as she sat in her room surrounded by papers and sketches, she noticed something odd about the notebook. The final page, which had seemed blank at first glance, was now faintly marked with words that hadn't been there before. Her pulse quickened as she held the page under her desk lamp. The words were scrawled in Liam's handwriting, barely visible. To finish what I couldn't, go to the place where beginnings meet endings. Maya's breath caught. The message was cryptic, but something about it resonated deeply. She thought of all the places Liam had drawn her to, the cafe, the alley, the house on Grayson Avenue. Each one had been a step along a journey she hadn't even realized she was taking. Where did beginnings meet endings? She closed her eyes, letting her mind drift. The answer came to her like a whisper. The site of the fire. The cafe had been rebuilt after the fire, but the remains of the old building still stood nearby, hidden behind a chain-link fence and a sign that read, "No trespassing." Maya had walked past it a dozen times without giving it a second thought. That night, under a sky heavy with stars, she made her way to the ruins. The air was cold, biting against her skin as she slipped through a gap in the fence. The ground was uneven, littered with broken bricks and charred wood. The skeleton of the old cafe loomed ahead, its walls blackened and crumbling. Maya's flashlight cast long, flickering shadows as she stepped inside. It was quiet, save for the soft crunch of debris under her boots. But there was something else, an energy in the air, like the hum of a barely audible frequency. At the center of the room, where the fire had burned hottest, she found a circular scorch mark on the floor. Kneeling down, she placed Liam's notebook at its center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air grew warmer, and the hum grew louder. A faint light began to emanate from the notebook, its glow illuminating the ruins. Maya stepped back, her heart pounding as the light coalesced into a shape, a figure. Liam. He stood there, translucent but unmistakably real. His gray eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. "You came," he said, his voice soft but steady. Tears filled Maya's eyes. "I had to. You left me this." She gestured to the notebook. Liam smiled faintly. "It was never mine alone. It was meant to be shared, to live on." Maya stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Why me, Liam? Why did you come to me?" His expression grew thoughtful. "Because you saw me. Not as a memory or a shadow, but as I was. You didn't just remember. I mattered to you, and that gave me the strength to return, even for a moment." The glow around him began to dim, and panic surged through Maya. "No, don't go. Please, there's so much I still don't understand." Liam shook his head gently. "You've already answered the most important question." "What question?" He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. "Who we are to each other. You gave me purpose, Maya, and I hope, in some way, I gave you the same." The light around him flickered, his form growing fainter. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You have the notebook," Liam said, his voice a fading echo. "Finish the story. Write your own." And with that he was gone, leaving only the notebook and the faint scent of rain in the air. Maya stood in the ruins for a long time, the weight of what had happened settling over her. When she finally left, the notebook pressed tightly against her chest, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Liam's story might have ended, but hers was just beginning. She walked home under the stars, her mind alive with possibilities. The echoes of Liam's words stayed with her, guiding her as she began to write. Not just for him, but for herself. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. Final chapter. The Echo of Forever. Months passed, yet the memory of Liam lingered in Maya's heart like a favorite melody. Soft, bittersweet, and unshakable. His notebook had become her constant companion, its worn leather cover a testament to the hours she spent studying his words and sketches. But it wasn't just Liam's stories she immersed herself in. She began adding her own thoughts, her own sketches. Slowly, the notebook transformed into something new, a collaboration between two souls who had met across impossible boundaries. She found herself back at the cafe one winter morning, the snow falling softly outside the window. The rebuilt space buzzed with quiet chatter, the scent of coffee weaving warmth into the air. It felt different now, more vibrant, as if the shadows of the past had lifted. The barista smiled at her as she ordered her usual and sat at the same table by the window. She opened the notebook and began sketching. A scene of two figures standing in the rain, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a street lamp. "Is this seat taken?" The voice startled her, low and warm, with a gentle hesitance. She looked up to see a man about her age, holding a coffee cup and gesturing to the empty chair across from her. His eyes were gray, not quite Liam's, but close enough to send a ripple of déjà vu through her. "Oh no, please sit," she said, moving her bag aside. "Thanks," he replied, settling into the chair. He glanced at the notebook in her hands, curiosity sparking in his gaze. "That's beautiful. Are you an artist?" "Sort of," Maya said, her cheeks warming. "It's more of a hobby." He smiled, his expression kind. "Well, you're talented. What's the story behind that?" Maya hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the notebook. How could she explain the impossible, the man who had existed both in life and beyond it? The connection that had changed her forever? "It's a long story," she said finally, her lips curving into a small smile. "I've got time," he replied, leaning forward slightly, his interest genuine. For a moment, Maya studied him, her heart fluttering in a way that was both unfamiliar and strangely comforting. And then she began to tell him. That evening, as she walked home, she felt lighter, the weight of the past no longer a burden, but a quiet strength. The man, his name was Ethan, had listened intently, not judging, not questioning. They had exchanged numbers before parting ways, and she found herself smiling at the thought of seeing him again. When she reached her apartment, she opened the notebook to the final page, the one where Liam's faint message had appeared. To her surprise, new words now filled the page, written in the same familiar hand. "Every ending is a beginning. Live fully, Maya, and never stop telling our story." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not of sadness. "Thank you, Liam," she whispered. Over the years, Maya fulfilled her promise. She published a book, a blend of Liam's unfinished works and her own stories, intertwined with her illustrations. It was called The Unfinished Hour. The book became a quiet success, resonating with readers who felt lost, who yearned for connection, who understood the beauty of incomplete things. Ethan became a constant in her life, their bond growing into something tender and steady. He never tried to replace the ghost of Liam. Instead, he helped Maya honor his memory by supporting her creative journey. And though Liam never returned, his presence remained, a whisper in the rain, a glimmer in the stars, and a soft echo in her heart. Maya often wondered if Liam had found peace, if he had finally stepped beyond time's boundaries. But in her heart, she knew the answer. He wasn't gone. He lived in the words they had shared, in the lives they had touched, and in the story that would never truly end.